He is the ranking member of the Senate Finance Committee and the ranking Democrat on the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. Senator Wyden lives in Portland with his wife, Nancy, and their 5 children. Please welcome Senator Ron Wyden.
I've introduced legislation to do just that. I'm going to talk a little bit about it, but it is particularly important right now because there are states without a paper trail. And there are states that use these voting machines. And it wasn't very long ago when the biggest voting machine company in the country, ES&S, sold machines with remote access software. And folks, that's about as dumb as putting our ballots on the street of Moscow. And we've all watched what's going on in Georgia right now, and the conflict apparently between the Republican candidate for governor and doing the right thing. So we care deeply about these issues. I get asked regularly about voting and voting rights at town hall meetings, and I was the first senator entirely elected by mail. And the right to vote is the core of the freedom that the Founding Fathers had in mind. Elections, to us, have always been sacred, but our response to the gaps in the system have fallen miles and miles short. The 2016 attack was plotted and perpetrated by agents of the Russian government. And it came from the very top. And everybody knows about the successful efforts to spread lies through social media. Court documents that were released a few months ago showed that Russian intelligence officials hacked into computers, stole data, and planted surveillance software. They were basically out there hoovering up voter data of 500,000 Americans. They targeted our election infrastructure and searched for vulnerabilities that might have allowed them to affect the results. And I'm asked all the time to give people a comparison with respect to how this works, and the best comparison I can give you is that dangerous foreign hackers are like burglars knocking on doors. They're out knocking on doors, they're out knocking on windows, they're just looking for vulnerabilities. Is there somebody who left the garage open or some kind of window that's in the back? And they've got every reason to try it again. And I'm not getting into anything classified, but it is not just the Russians. By the way, you may have seen what happened this week. The president said that the Chinese are meddling with the election. So I decided, because I'm on the Intelligence Committee, my older child calls it the so-called Intelligence Committee. I sent a letter to Dan Coates, the head of National Intelligence. Kamala Harris, our terrific new senator from California, may hear a little bit about her next year. And also Martin Heinrich, my young colleague in New Mexico, very fine senator. We said to the director of national intelligence, the president is out there publicly stating the Chinese are meddling in the elections. You're the director of national intelligence. I don't want you to give out anything classified, but do you agree with the president's public comments? A couple days ago, the head of national intelligence sent me a classified response. So do you think the president was maybe just possibly fudging on the truth? I don't know. We'll have to see. But the bottom line is these dangerous foreign hackers win when Americans lose faith in our democracy. And it is obvious they are not going to quit. And by the way, when the president's own intelligence officials were asked about the threat, they said, their words, not mine, the lights are blinking red. These are the president's intelligence officials. So, you would think that the federal government, working with the states, would have done everything in its power to secure our elections for 2018 and beyond. That isn't even close to what is happening. The voting machines are still easily hacked. There aren't enough paper ballots backing up the votes. Voter data is not properly secured. And to me, you ought to look at attacks on voting as like military attacks on our country. Given the lack of a strong response, it's as if FDR woke up on December 8, 1941 and say, nobody knows where Pearl Harbor is anyway. A few generations before that, everybody said, it's okay, forget the Alamo. The point is, these are national security issues when dangerous foreign hackers and threats try to rob us of our franchise. And my view is that this administration is basically sitting it out. They haven't done enough to protect this sacred democracy of ours. Now, I want to touch on just a few of the key strategies, and then we're going to get to the questions. All of the independent cybersecurity experts say that there are two things you have to do to protect the vote. Oregon has done both of them. One is to have a paper trail for every ballot cast. And the other is to have what are called risk-limiting audits. And the reason they're so important is that they give you a sense of what the threats might be, what kind of things people are tapping on your windows about. And I introduced legislation that has now been supported by a host of our Senate colleagues to do just that. And I did it after the Homeland Security Department finally said in an open intelligence hearing, and we don't have very many open intelligence hearings, and I treat each one kind of like a ruby in my hands. You have to prepare really to use that moment. Some of you may remember I asked James Clapper at one of the open intelligence hearings whether the government collected any type of data at all on millions of Americans. And he looked at me, and he looked at the committee, and he lied to the American people. Said, no, we don't. A few months later, a fellow named Snowden said I was watching that. That was a lie. And we all know what happened. We got a bill passed to rein some of that in. But the fact is, when you have the Homeland Security Secretary saying that paperless voting machines, these are her words, pose a national security concern, and that they're just too easy to hack, and you can't have an easy way to verify the results, that ought to be a wake-up call. And it is not a Democratic wake-up call or a Republican wake-up call. It's a wake-up call. And it's something that ought to concern everybody. And I mentioned the voting machines. Let me tell you something. The days when these voting machine companies and their lobby are above the law are over. They are over. And I am committed to reining these abuses in. They have stonewalled the Congress for too long. They've thought they were above the law. There are no minimum standards for them, and it has to end. Period, full stop. Now, with respect to our efforts overall, I think we have to also bring into this debate the question of the politics of disenfranchising people of color. And I look at what is going on in Georgia. I look at what is going on in a number of communities. There are examples where polling places in majority-minority communities have been closed at higher rates. We have seen evidence of intimidation tactics at the polls. Many Americans of color get kicked off voter rolls when their participation in democracy is just inconvenient to those in power. There's one community in Kansas, Dodge City, that literally moved its polling place outside the city limits to make it harder for people to get there on election day. You'd literally need to get out of Dodge to exercise your right to vote. So I'm going to close by way of saying that this, folks, is deeply un-American, unpatriotic stuff. It's wrong to hurt people of color this way, wrong to hurt working Americans, wrong to hurt young people, wrong to hurt Americans with disabilities. And by the way, we know who it helps. It helps the lobbyists and the special interests. And by the way, it's a huge gift to the dark money crowd. Some of you may have seen I've spent a lot of time trying to rein in dark money. You know what happened a couple weeks ago? The Trump people made it easier for dark money, possibly dark money coming from foreign sources, to get into our election system. They relaxed the requirements on those donations being disclosed by the IRS, so we would have the tools to run them down. So now the IRS can't get the information, and nobody else is getting it. And I have real reservations about even how the IRS would find them. And you couple that with the Citizens United decision, which basically took the limits off campaign finance in America, and you have a really combustible mix that can do in the rights of a lot of American voters. So, there's a way to get out of these un-American schemes. And that way, everybody know the way? What is it? Vote by mail. What is it? Vote by mail. City Club, I can't hear that. What is the way out? Vote by mail. All right, now we're talking. So, I think we're probably going to have to do it in 2 steps. My first step is my bill to have a paper ballot for everybody, paper trail for everyone. And then my second step is going to be for everybody to have a chance in America to vote by mail. Then we get away from the un-American schemes that I've been talking to you about, the un-American schemes that are disenfranchising people of color and young people and so many working Americans, that have given the voting machine lobby unbelievable clout over our elections and perpetrated travesties like we're seeing in the state of Georgia. We are lucky in Oregon to have vote by mail. I'm going to do my very best to take what is yet another Oregon first. We love being first. We've been first in a lot of things. But being first in democracy, that's something that's really special. Thank you for having me.